We are still on the first book in the series. We're getting toward the end of it, and today we are discussing Jon VIII and Daenerys VII.
Yeah.
These two people who will eventually go on to be lovers are now separated by vast oceans of distance.
They are.
And working through their problems. Josh Hill, what jumped out at you about Jon VII, which is kind of a lower key episode, just him at the wall having feelings?
Yeah, well, first of all, hi, everybody. This is an honor to be here, as always. Who do we have here? Julie?
Well, we have Julie, we have Daniel, we have Kenny. And Daniel, by the way, how can you send me pictures? You can send me them through Facebook messages. I believe you can do that just on the page.
Yeah.
Or if Richard Durante, our editor, would be so kind and type my email address, dan.selke@winteriscoming.net. What's that? Beautiful. It's on the screen.
There we
Just
go.
send it there. I will totally look at them, and I would love to see them. Okay, anyway, Jon VII, you were saying.
Hi, everybody, is what I was
Yes.
actually saying. Do we have Michael Douglas here?
I didn't see him.
I watched the game the other night. That's
We gotta stop making fun of Michael Douglas.
Very underrated Michael Douglas movie. I like Jon VII was a good one. This is the Don't Love Anybody
It was.
chapter. This is the old Jedi. You can't have a wife.
I was going to say,
You can't
I
fall
feel
in
like
love.
heroes get that advice a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just John.
It seems like a very heroic thing, I guess, to not have a heart. So you can't have a heart and be at the wall, though, I think is kind of the moral of that. You can't devote your life to anything other than protecting the wall. And that's, it's kind of ham-fisted in that don't have a wife, you can't love, you can only, you're married to the job, you're married to the force, the police force. But it's kind of the way it's got to go, because we know it's beyond the wall. And once you see what's beyond the wall, we're coming into this, at least I am, like John, where it's like, I don't know. I mean, I know on the show, but I don't know what this is all about. This is all kind of like, Boy Scouts a little bit, because we're all at camp, we're all learning how to do crafts and do, fight, spar and all that kind of stuff. But it's like the old, we make a lot of war analogies with this part of the story. And I get that again, too, with the whole you can't have relationships outside of the Night's Watch. Because the guys that go beyond the wall, the guys that see what's beyond the wall, they know that you just can't have anything other than that. You don't want to bring anything else into that.
It takes all of you to do this job, is what Maester Aemon's telling Jon here.
Yeah, and you don't want to bring anybody else into that life that doesn't have to be. I know it's maybe like you can stem off into this kind of, there's weaker beings out there. You don't want to bring children into this, but like you don't want to bring other relationships that it's like the old police thing. You don't know if you're going to come home at night.
We'll lose out to the job in the end.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I took away from this, even though it is kind of that old ham-fisted, you're a hero. You don't have any time to win the girl. You just have to go out and get the job done. So
I mean, it is common now that I think about it. Personally, I really like the monologue. Like this is so Jon Snow. His problem this chapter is he's wondering if he should leave because Robb has gone to war, and he feels a word they love in this series, craven, which is medieval for cowardly, that he's not with them.
Yeah,
I think I wrote it down. Blah, 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 blah. No, I didn't. Oh, yes, I did. Robb was marching, and he was not. No matter how often Jon told himself that his place was here now, with his new brothers on the wall, he still felt craven. So he's like, I took these vows, I'm here, but my brother's out going to war, trying to get back my father and my sisters. Like, I got to go help them. And it's about trying to take the grown-up tack and do what you committed to do. Even though the cool heroic thing is to beat Luke Skywalker, to make a reference that you will understand and like, and leave Dagobah and go help your friends, even though Yoda told you not to. And I think that's where Jon is right now. And and everyone is lining up to tell him why he shouldn't. Like the subtext here is that Lord Commander Mormont knows Jon is thinking that, so he's like, you should stay. Here's this cool-ass sword. Here's Longclaw. It's awesome.
Longclaw, the Longclaw chapter.
Which is a cool-ass gift.
Yeah.
Valyrian steel sword. And, of course, Martin sets that up, because Valyrian steel is a big, I guess you call it a mythological component to the story. It's important. It can kill White Walkers. He needs to establish how cool it is. So he gives him that. It's like a priceless gift, which is basically sort of a bribe to, like, you should stay here.
Yeah.
You can get cool stuff like that. Do not leave.
Yeah.
And then Maester Aemon gives him this I thought, rather lovely chat about, the death of duty. And he reveals who he is. He's actually Aemon Targaryen.
Yeah.
And he tells the story of, when Robert Baratheon killed my relatives, the Mad King is I forget exactly how they're related. I think he's like a great nephew.
I was trying to look that up to see. I was looking at the family tree, and he's nowhere near Rhaegar, it looks like. So it must be some kind
It's
of
also different in the show. He's closer
relative.
in the show.
Okay.
It's I'm pretty sure the Mad King is Maester Aemon's great or even great nephew, because his brother was king.
Yeah.
And then, his son became king, and then his son eventually got the crazy guy who's Mad King. So it makes Rhaegar's great nephew, and then the kids who died is great. You get the idea.
Yeah.
So it's they all died. I wanted to leave. I was old at that time. I really couldn't. So I stayed here. And then obviously that relates to what Jon's going through right now. Because he's do I leave and go help my brother go to war?
Yeah.
My own family's being hurt, or do I stay? I will not tell you to stay or go. You must make that choice yourself and live with it all the rest of your days, as I have. Pretty sweeping there.
Daunting.
Yeah. I also love how that whole sequence where Maester Aemon is talking to Jon about the importance of love and duty and how you got to stay true to the duty and can't love anybody is interspersed with them feeding chum to the ravens.
Yeah.
It's just a really nice visual kind of counterpoint to this serious thing they're talking about. And of course, as we know, because you've watched the show, you haven't read the books, but I've done both. We both watched the show. This is extremely pertinent because Jon will go on to be directly tempted with love in the form of Ygritte. Who he's going to meet. It's going to be a whole thing. It's going to be a whole arc. He's going to die in his arms later. And this is basically set up for that. And it'll be a test. Is he going to abide by this lesson? He ends up, yes, because we already know.
Yeah.
But he's going to be really, really tested. So I think this is also set up for that arc. He's looking ahead to what will happen with the Jon Ygritte love arc, Martin is.
Yeah. It's also, I don't know, weird or cool or whatever you want to say. George R.R. Martin's writing this, the Ygritte and the Jon Snow thing. And little does he know when he's writing it at the time in his cabin in the woods, wherever he is, that these characters are going to end up becoming a real life married couple. He doesn't write these characters.
Oh, that's a good point.
Maybe, what's it, Rose, whatever her name is?
Rose Leslie.
Rose Leslie, that's what it is. And Kit Harington don't meet and they don't get married. So thank you, George, for that.
That's a good point. George R. Martin is directly responsible for Kit Harington and Rose Leslie getting married.
Matchmaker in the woods.
25 years before, just match made. It's amazing how that happened.
Yeah, but the ironic part too is the character. This whole thing is bore out of don't love anything. You can't have this, and then it ends up in real life creating actual love.
It's very sweet, John. It's a very nice interpretation.
Well, George R. R. Martin did it. I just read it. Okay. No, I do like the relationship that Jon has here with Aemon.
Yes, Karen.
So, and it kind of. He doesn't have a whole lot of friends at the wall, it seems. I mean,
I think he
Jon does. Yeah, Jon does. Jon doesn't have many people I don't think he would consider to be in his close circle. He has
Sam.
Brothers, I would say, but there's Sam, and then there's this relationship.
I thought it was kind of adorable how after he got his Valyrian steel sword, he brought it out, and everybody's like, "Oh man, this is so cool! I'm gonna play with it."
The old Boy Scout thing. So.
Yeah, but which again, you're right. It did feel very like Sandlot or something.
Yeah, like the first year at Hogwarts or something.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. But I do like how he does have these
Sandlot.
Acquaintances and he does have these relationships with people, but it always feels like his circle is so small of people he would actually trust or people he actually lets in or has these extended conversations with. So, and I always like it when he, meets these characters where we get some more insight on him and on other characters and insight on these relationships because it feels like he's coming out of his shell a little bit more each time. So it's
hard to do with Jon because he is a moody teenager. I just enjoyed this line. His hand ached and the taste of anger was in his mouth, though he could not have said who he was angry with or why. It's that's the teenage condition. That's what Jon's going through right now. By the way, Karen wants to talk a little bit about Maester Aemon. He explains he could have been king, and they don't go into the story too much in this chapter, but kind of beyond this, he has backstory, Maester Aemon.
Yeah.
He was first in line for the throne, and he refused it. And he said, put my brother on it instead, he'll do a better job. And he went to the wall instead.
Yeah.
So he has this really cool history, and that will come out later. Also, another ironic thing, Jon's related to Maester Aemon. He just doesn't know it. Jon is Rhaegar's son.
Right. That's
So
right, yeah.
this is actually a conversation between a nephew and his great, however many greats it is, uncle.
Yeah, there you go.
Fun.
The old Targaryen family tree.
I mean, yeah, they're talking.
It is.
Like we're all talking about like how there are no Targaryens left. No, there's two chatting right there at the wall. There's neither of them know it. And George R. R. Martin knew that back then because we've had the scenes with Ned in his dream with the whole Lyanna stuff. So
Yeah.
so he knew what he was doing, I think. So he knew they were related, which is a fun little bit. All right, any other comments about this one?
No, I mean, just like the whole theme of Jon having to choose between honor and love.
It's a classic theme, right?
Yeah, and it's also one that Ned had to choose too. Like,
Absolutely.
So it's kind of, he's not his actual son. There's not a relationship there as far as biology is concerned.
Oh, it's a nurture situation.
It's a nurture situation, and it's kind of cool to see that he's dealing with the same things, and it kind of peddles the theory too, or not the theory, but at the time, I guess, when you're reading the book, that he is Ned's son. But it's kind of cool that different places, different characters, they're not even actually related, but they're having to go through the same kind of journey and the same kind of decisions. And it's, what will Jon do? Will he make the same mistakes?
Yeah.
Will he lose his head? But
Exactly.
that was kind of cool. The similar paths being followed.
I mean, it also goes back to like there's only like the one hero story at the end of the day, and a lot of stories end up being like this. You got to have conflict.
Yeah.
Speaking of conflict, by the way, really quick, Beth says in the books Rhaegar's real son lives. Beth, we will get to that, and that is a controversial statement. I'm not sure that's true. It's a whole kerfuffle there. No Dance with Dragons. Speaking of conflict, Daenerys Targaryen.
Yes.
By the way, if you want to watch, hear us in podcast form on your way to work or something, we are available on iTunes and Google Play. Just helpful hint.
There you go. There's no if about it. There's people want to listen to us on the way to work.
I'll try another tack.
You're stuck in
You want to
traffic.
listen to us on the way to work or in the elevator or at the gym. We're available on iTunes. Look us up. All right, Daenerys Targaryen.
Yes.
Daenerys VII. All right. So what is her big conflict in this chapter?
Well, there's a couple of them, actually. There's the main overarching conflict is, I don't remember if this is, I was trying to picture this from the show, and I think maybe she does it twice in the show, or this is a meshed moment. But the idea of not having the Dothraki be horrible, raping, pillaging
Yes.
warrior folk.
Right. I mean,
was a
they
main struggle here for
They get
her.
explicit at the
Yes.
top, right? This
Oh,
is a
yeah.
chapter about the Dothraki are raiding this Lazarene village, the Lamb people, and it gets pretty upfront. It's what we're describing. The Dothraki have set a town afire. That they've taken slaves. A girl no older than Dany is being raped over a pile of corpses. They kind of toy with this one boy who tries to run away, and then they just kill him. And the conflict is what?
The conflict is she doesn't want them to do that.
Yeah.
The conflict is that she sees that this is wrong. I mean, it seems very basic, but she's like, what the hell? Like, this needs to stop. And she actually sticks up and she actually says, like, no. And the Dothraki get kind of a little angry at her. But
Yeah,
of course,
a little
she's got the main Dothraki in her corner.
It helps to have the king in their corner, yeah.
I remember we talked about the context of real historical context of this, of the Dothraki and Native Americans,
The Scythians or the Huns or the Mongols or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and George R. R. Martin, how old is he? Like,
Now he's like pushing 70, I want to say.
yeah, so he's like of the era. He's like of the Vietnam era. So to me, this
He was
kind of,
a conscientious objector.
yeah. So this to me was like the My Lai massacre. There's
Ooh, okay. Good
this
call.
to me was, I really saw this. Maybe this was because I was just watching the Ken Burns Vietnam documentary.
God, it's so
But-
long, it's good.
But also, I saw a lot of parallels in this, where it's just like you have this army come in and they're just doing these awful, horrible things, and you do have a conscientious objector in there or a moral compass being like, this isn't part of this war path we're on. This is not the objective that we're trying to achieve here. And a lot of the images were similar, where you have soldiers come into a village and they are raping the women and the children,
Raping and
and
pillaging,
right
good
down to the
old-fashioned.
toying with, like, there's stories of like soldiers in Vietnam toying with people as they're trying to run away and just like executing them, or like having like sick fun that way. And I saw a lot of parallels with that in this chapter, and it kind of reminded me of George R. R. Martin playing on certain parts of history, and whether or not that's actually where he was coming from with this, it's that whole, you can insert this into any era of history, past, present, future, because we could be interpreting this in 10 years. Something's happening. We're like, that was like Game of Thrones back in 1997.
Yeah, it's that timeless thing again.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
and kind of drawing on that, and the fact that George R. R. Martin was a conscientious objector kind of like stood up to me. I was like, oh, maybe.
No, that makes sense. I do like that. I mean, in terms of massacres, like you can go way further back than my lives.
Like Genghis Khan,
like the Romans, you know, torching Carthage to the ground, salting the earth off, that kind of thing. When we're talking about how horrible it is Daenerys in denial at all about it? Because, as she points out, what does she want to do? She wants to sail back to Westeros and retake the Iron Throne. What does she think that's going to look like?
By force.
By force.
Yeah.
She just, like, no, they're not going to hand it over to her. This King Robert, who is, unbeknownst to her, is dead. She doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Or maybe she does. Who cares? Or in Joffrey, they're not going to hand it over to her. She expects a fight. And this is her getting a look at like what that fight might look like if she takes the Dothraki over. And she talks about it in her head. It's, I am the blood of the dragon, Daenerys Targaryen reminded herself. She turned her face away. She pressed her lips together and hardened her heart and rode on toward the gate. She wanted to cry, but told herself that she must be strong. This is war. This is what it looks like. This is the price of the Iron Throne. So there is a part of her that's like trying to get used to this, but it's almost like she can't quite do it.
Yeah.
But, and so instead, she makes peace that by kind of seeing these women being raped and like claiming them as hers, basically taking slaves is what she's actually doing. But at least she figures, at least if they're my slaves, they won't be mistreated.
Right.
Is she fooling herself? Like, is that enough to, like, is this putting a Band-Aid on a gut wound? Like, can you really wage a non-violent, just war by making sure at least people that you see don't get really, really, really hurt, even though their village has been burned down and everything?
Yeah, I think she's definitely trying to justify it in her mind. And also I think this is maybe like the hardening of Dany as kind of having this spiritual view of, I can take over King's Landing and it's not going to be a violent, hostile takeover. I'm just going to walk up, and maybe she doesn't have the idea that she's just going to walk up and, you know, the throne's going to be handed to her.
Sure.
But it kind of indicates to me that this isn't a plan that's been thought through to conclusion.
No, you're right.
Because
She's still early on here.
Yeah, and it's kind of like romanticizing the idea of taking back what's yours, taking back what's yours for your family, without actually thinking about how the sausage gets made. And it's going to be really gross, and it's going to be really brutal. And this is kind of her first kind of introduction to that, I guess. And I do see her really trying to justify, oh, if I can just do it this way, because I know I have no cruel intentions behind it, so it's better if I do it, whereas I don't know if these raping and pillaging warriors are necessarily thinking the same way. But it is kind of a slippery slope to go down, you know? So once you get a little taste of it, it's like, okay, I did it in, you know, the City of Lambs or whatever this is. I can do it again over
Bye,
here
Julie.
and all
She's
this
going.
kind of thing. Oh, no, bye, Julie. See you later. Bye. So it's kind of like, I can do it again, I can do it again, I can do it again, and it's not. She's desensitizing herself to the guilt of it. The more that she does it, and you know, you got to rip. You talk about the Band-Aid on the gut wound. You got to rip the Band-Aid off at some point. But once it's off, then everything's exposed and out there. So.
Yeah, I hear you saying. I think this comes together in the character of a Miri Maz-Dur, who is this lady. She saves an older, flat-nosed woman. They keep saying. Do you recall her from the show?
No, I recall where her story goes with Drago and everything, and trying to heal him.
She's the one who heals Drago, and then she's the one who delivers Dany's baby, but she does it purposely wrong, and like it ends up making her barren, and then she will eventually kind of she'll keep Drago alive, but in a catatonic state.
Yeah,
and she'll end up having this speech to Dany, where Dany's like, "I saved you. How could you do this to me?" She's like, "Oh, you saved me? Everyone I knew was dead or enslaved, and my village was burned down, and I was raped like 8 times before you got to me. Why should I be grateful?" Which I think, we haven't gotten to that yet, but I can't help but think about it when I read this. I think that is Martin's way of showing that Dany might be fooling herself a little bit. That, I mean, she says this to herself. She says, Dany felt she could trust this old, plain-faced woman with her flat nose. She had saved her from the hard hands of her rapers after all. Saying, like, I did this one good thing, so that makes up for all these horrible things everybody's doing right.
Yeah.
And the solution might be a little more complex than that.
Yeah, it's very naive of Dany to kind of think this. And it reminded me of the old, you go to a big city and you're like from a small country town, or like I'm from Minnesota, so it was like, I know plenty of people that grew up in smaller
Which has
towns.
like 9 people in it total.
Yeah, it's 9.5, depending. You never know. So like, you have people that live in small towns, small farm towns, and they go to the big city. It's like the old 1970s cliche, you get off the bus and you're in New York and you're like, I'm going to make it after all. And you trust the homeless people on the street and nobody's going to do you wrong because everybody has goodwill and there's no such thing as a bad person. And this really reminded me of that, where Dany's kind of being taken advantage of because the Dothraki don't trust these like gypsy witch people. And it turns out it's for a good reason. But Dany's like, no, we can't think that. We can't think that she's evil and she's bad and we have to see her point of view and all this kind of stuff, which parallels to a lot of social conversation we have now.
Absolutely.
About, we can't, we have to give certain people who are elected president a chance because they're going to be fine, and it turns out to be a giant disaster.
Careful.
Yeah, so it's like a theme every week, and weave it in there. But it's the same thing.
Because the story is good. The story invites readings lots of different kinds.
Yeah, but it's that whole kind of don't trust. You can't be so trusting without caution, and Dany here, to me, is being very trusting without any caution. And also, the angle being taken advantage of is Drago's wounded, like mortally wounded.
Yeah.
So she has a stake in that to say, this is going to work. I have to save him.
It's not like there's no reason to take her help. She's a healing woman.
Yeah, but it's the naivety of being like, there's all these Dothraki saying this is, which is another thing, because all the Dothraki are like, don't trust her, she's evil, she's
But these guys are the ones who are like pillaging and raping and burning
and pillaging.
stuff.
So we've set up this whole perspective of they're untrustworthy, and we can't. I mean, who's going to trust the rapists and the people doing the pillaging? But they end up being right. So it's this weird duality that Dany, and it's just all overwhelming for Dany. This was a very big chapter, I think, for her growth as far as weeding out what you should believe and not believe in the world.
I like Karen's comment here. She was naive about war. Remember that she is the same age as Sansa, roughly. This is her first taste of war, which is true.
That's right.
It's hard to picture Sansa riding into
that.
here and doing anything but crying and hiding under a blanket, at least at this stage. Maybe later she'll be fine with that. But it's complex. There are layers to which I like. I like the idea that Martin doesn't kind of make a bad guy who's completely bad and there's nothing to do about him, or a pure Mary Sue, whatever you want to call him, good person who just has all the right answers.
Yeah.
The Dothraki are awful, and they're also right.
Yeah.
And Miriam Mazdur should be saved from this horrible time. Doesn't mean she's going to be a nice person to you.
Yeah.
Like, there are no easy choices for Daenerys, which I think is a little closer to what it would really be like, rather than like a story you can kind of write your way around.
Yeah, there's no black and white. There's just a big smear of gray area that you kind of have to navigate your way through.
That's why the books are so freaking huge.
It's true, but we're getting to the end of this one.
We are. I think next week we should do just one chapter. It's a Tyrion chapter, and I believe it is the first battle of anything. It's long, and it's Martin's going to write some battle scenes for us. See how that goes.
All
like
right.
a proper battle, not like a fight.
I'm on vacation next week, so we'll be in 2 weeks.
Cool. In 2
So
weeks
I will
we'll be back
reading
with
this by a lake.
Sweet.
There you go. Just like George R. R.
Is
Martin.
that in Minnesota?
In Minnesota.
Very nice.
One of the 10,000.
So how do your family?
I will.
We'll do Tyrion, next Tyrion chapter, just a big battle chapter. It'll be fun in 2 weeks. Next week I'll be here alone, and hope to see. Oh, Michael Douglas. Wouldn't Jon have to be older than Robb then? I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're responding to, Michael Douglas. I'm just excited to see you're here. Which we should stop making fun of his name, really.
We're not making fun of him. I like Michael Douglas.
We're making a little
I like
fun
all
of his
Michael
name.
Douglases. It's a solid name. It's Oak.
Okay,
Oak
actually,
name.
let's respond to his question seriously, just so we can establish that you're more than just a joke about your name. Wouldn't Jon have to be older than Robb then? I think they're like really close to the same age, because Catelyn would have been having Robb while Ned was at war, while he was getting the newborn Jon. So they're like almost. They're super duper close. Like they're definitely the same year.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how much. And Kenny asked, how was Kayla doing in LA? I haven't talked to her in the past couple of weeks. Have you?
I haven't. I saw she was at the ESPYs, which is a
Oh, was
sports
she?
award show.
Cool.
She was in attendance. She wasn't like presenting at the show. And I believe she's doing some nannying, so she's making a living.
Great. I'll chat her up
LA,
and find out.
yeah.
Perhaps we can have Kayla back for guest spot sometime.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next week, Wednesday, 4 o'clock, for more Game of Thrones news and more A Song of Dan and Josh. Hope to see you guys then.